So I thought that I wasn't going to have to make a film criticism is dead video for the Marvels. Because for once, for a while there, it looked like the Rotten Tomatoes score for the film was appropriately low. It was so low at one point that it had certain individuals proclaiming that the Rotten Tomatoes score means absolutely nothing. Yes, the same people who used a fresh score as a badge of honor for years because it validated their opinion, suddenly began speaking out that most of the negative reviews for this movie were grifters and shouldn't be taken seriously.
My, how the tables have turned.
However, over the past couple of days, the Rotten Tomatoes score for the Marvels has begun to rise. So much so that at the time of making this video, the film is no longer considered rotten. And this seems like a suspicious bit of activity once again going on over at that garbage tier website. What's interesting to me is that there are no videos being made and no articles being written about the possibility of some people review boosting this movie, because we know that if it was going the other direction, that review bombing would be everyone's first excuse. But so far, not so much as a peep, because this rising Rotten Tomatoes score supports the narrative that Hollywood, Disney, and Marvel itself would love to spin in this situation. That narrative being that this movie is better than people are giving it credit for, and that you should go out and support it. So let's dive into some of these reviews and see if we can figure out what it is exactly about this movie that has people so desperate to defend it. Let's discuss.
I watch so you don't have to.
All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
So when early reactions started to come out for this film, it was a lot of your very scripted and robotic reactions that gave you the impression that people were being told what to say instead of giving their honest opinions. And to be clear, this is not an isolated incident. It's been happening with MCU films for a while now, and it seems like only recently have people begun to catch on to it. The word fun is being thrown around a lot in reference to this movie, and like any word that's been used incorrectly or too frequently, it's begun to lose all meaning.
You keep using the word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
We all know that fun is just a not-so-secret code word for zero substance and a lack of creativity, which coincidentally is a perfect description for the Marvels and most modern MCU films in general. As I take a quick glance at some of these Rotten Tomatoes reviews, it's clear to me that a lot of these critics, and again I use that term very loosely, are just regurgitating some of the same empty praise that a lot of the early reactions were giving us prior to the film's release. And we'll start with Diarrhea of the Mouth herself, Grace Randolph, who has made a name for herself recently by being a person with a huge platform who also has some of the absolute worst film takes possible. Grace said, quote, "The Marvels is a lot of fun, and at 1 hour and 45 minutes, short and sweet. The chemistry between the three leads is fantastic. Plus the action scenes are inventive. It may not have broad appeal, but with some, it will really connect." For reference, this is again the woman who hated Oppenheimer and Killers of the Flower Moon. I guess the sweet spot for Grace Randolph is short, non-consequential plot points that don't require you to think too much.
That makes sense.
Grace is just doubling down on most of the typical talking points that we've been hearing about this film. Things like it's fun, and the actresses have chemistry. Although I would argue that this movie is only fun if you are a certain type of moviegoer, which to Grace's credit she kind of touches upon when she states that this movie isn't necessarily going to be for everyone, but this notion that the characters carry the film and that their chemistry is off the charts is a bit of a head scratcher to me. I didn't find any of these characters to be all that interesting or entertaining, either individually or as a team. The chemistry between them is awkward, and I understand that it's written to be awkward to a certain extent, but it never really feels organically awkward. It's like they're trying really hard to make the Marvels the new quirky, misfit group of the MCU, and it just doesn't come off as naturally as some people are saying.
Not impressed.
But these are the type of talking points that defenders of this film will hang on to because there's not much else to praise. Which brings me to Nadine Whitney of The Curb, who says, Nia DaCosta's Marvels is ultimately both the worst and the best of the MCU's instincts wrapped up in a very cute package. Only a super Grinch would deny the infectiousness of Kamala Khan and what her energy brings to an increasingly exhausting genre. This person actually brings up a couple decent points. Yes, this film is the worst of the MCU rolled up into one package, but there's not much of the best of the MCU. And she's right, the genre is increasingly exhausting with every new entry. But the idea that a character like Kamala Khan is going to save the entire genre is one of the craziest things I've ever heard. It would make sense if Kamala Khan appealed to a teenage female fan, because that's who she is modeled after. But as a person who is not a teenage female fan, she didn't come off as infectious at all. In fact, she came off more annoying than anything. It really does feel like Kamala Khan is being used as a human shield to not only deflect criticism, but also be the scapegoat so everyone has something to praise in this unbelievably forgettable movie. And to be clear, once again, I'm not even saying her performance is bad. Let's just pump the brakes on everyone overhyping it as this career-defining performance. Not only does that put a lot of unnecessary expectations on a young actress moving forward, but I would like to see her grow as an actress in an actual good movie with good material before we start giving her flowers.
That's racist.
And then we have Montalise Stormer from the MovieRealist.com, who does an already struggling film absolutely no favors by proclaiming that, quote, "The Marvels isn't for them, and I wouldn't let their poor judgment cloud your desire to see this film. The Marvels is sweet and endearing in a way that takes girl power seriously, without compromising character development or action." First of all, if you really want to see this movie, you shouldn't ever let anyone's opinion deter you from doing so. But this does feel like Mona Lee is channeling her inner Brie Larson by echoing the sentiments of one of Brie's most infamous proclamations.
It wasn't made for him.
This is something that a lot of people have brushed off as male critics blowing out of proportion, but when you use it in the way that it's being used here, in a dismissive way, it doesn't typically have the desired outcome. Basically, what she is saying is that you shouldn't listen to male critics of this film because it's not made for them and they have poor judgment anyway. Basically grouping anyone with a dick who didn't like this movie altogether, and in the process trying to dismiss or minimalize their opinions.
Me, right?
If it's not been made clear already, this is this person's own personal opinions and views on society as a whole creeping into their so-called movie review. Plus, if you're going to suggest that this film is not made for men and their opinion doesn't matter, then you can't really get mad when men don't show up to support it. Ironically, it's been reported that around 63% of the opening day audience that went to see this film were male. So maybe targeting the female audience isn't the flex that you think it is, because women audiences don't seem to be interested in this film. This is why it's important to make films that appeal to everyone, and not just a specific group of people. That typically has an adverse effect on said groups who don't like to be catered to disingenuously.
Congratulations, you played yourself.
What's unfortunate is that I've seen a lot of genuine and valid criticism for this film basically being written off as misogyny or gatekeeping. And this is mostly coming again from people who don't want to have an actual discussion, but just want you to validate their opinion. A true film critic's job is not to validate you, it's to be critical and be honest. But the truth oftentimes sounds like hate to those who hate the truth.
You have a point.
If you are one of those people who genuinely enjoyed the Marvels, then I'm happy for you. I really am. But I would caution you to not turn your positivity into toxic positivity by putting down people who are not viewing this movie with their fan goggles on. Once again, you aren't doing these characters, Marvel, or Disney any favors by blindly supporting them and refusing to admit when they make a bad product. Twitter is one thing because after recent developments, I'm not even sure that half the people commenting on this film are actual people. Most of them seem like bots or even industry plants, whose goal is to drum up publicity and hype for a movie that has none of it. But Rotten Tomatoes is a different story altogether. It's already been proven that it's a corrupt and flawed system that's easily manipulated, and Disney minions and desperate fangirls and fanboys are out in full force trying to change the perception of this movie. In reality, it's too little too late. The film is already tracking below The Flash's numbers, which was considered a box office disaster earlier this year. And once again, that has everything to do with Marvel Studios now creating a bad product, and nothing to do with this phantom misogynistic hate campaign that they are trying to blame everything on.
Y'all be cool. Shut up.